Hi, my name is Dr. Antonio Graceffo, and welcome to China Economic Research. Today's episode, Economic Impact of the Coronavirus, Part 2. So if you haven't seen Part 1, you can watch it on YouTube, and today we're going to be talking about Part 2. The first thing about the coronavirus was that it was announced just shortly before the Lunar New Year holiday. Now, the Chinese Lunar New Year holiday is the largest human migration that occurs in the world each year, as hundreds of millions of Chinese travel back to the place where they were born, back to the place where their grandparents are living or were buried for the Lunar New Year. And for a lot of workers, this is really the only time that they have off. And this is just a massive travel time, and they like to buy a lot of gifts when they go, and then they travel home. And because because the virus was announced just before the Lunar New Year, basically it did one of two things. Some people traveled who may or may not have been infected or may have been exposed to the virus, and this helped spread the virus all over the country. Some people may have been either quarantined or locked down in particular cities where they weren't allowed to travel. This, of course, made a very sad New Year for them because they weren't able to see their family. But the people who went out and traveled, they spread the disease. And it started in Wuhan, and now it is present in every single province of China. Chinese people have certain superstitions, particularly related to the New Year, and they believe that if they have a bad New Year celebration, that this will set the tone for an unlucky year. And of course, this could not have been a worse New Year for them. Very interestingly, the behavior of the Shanghai stock market is often influenced by certain superstitions, people believing in certain lucky numbers, lucky days, things like this. And so I wonder if starting the year so badly is going to affect investor behavior for the entire year. The cancellation of public Chinese New Year celebrations has hurt the travel industry. It's hurt the retail industry. It's hurt restaurants. Chinese people normally buy just a ton of gifts, and then they travel and they go home and they give the gifts. Well, if they're not traveling, maybe they're also not buying the gifts. A lot of shops are closed. A lot of restaurants are closed anyway, so they're all losing money. A lot of people have quarantined themselves in their homes, and then this is all sort of dependent on which city, which village they're in, because some have different rules than others. There's some where people are pretty much discouraged from going out at all. There's others where theoretically you could go out, but all the shops are closed, so there's no point in going out. I've seen videos popping up on the internet of the major pub streets in Beijing, which are normally just teeming with people, and it looks like a ghost town. So a lot of retailers in China depend on the Lunar New Year purchases to make most or all of their profit for the year, the same way that in the United States, a lot of retailers are waiting for Christmas. In China, a lot of them make almost their whole profit during Lunar New Year, and this year they're going to make nothing during the Lunar New Year. Travel industry for travel both within China and abroad is also dependent on Chinese New Year. Some people get a longer holiday at Chinese New Year, so they go see their family for the high days of the holiday, the main days of the holiday, and then they go travel. And so the travel industry in the world right now is very much dependent on Chinese people because they represent a tremendous percentage of the total travel in the world. And of course, they're not traveling right now for Chinese New Year. So travel agencies are all taking a hit. Hotels, theme parks are closed. They're taking a hit. Retail, of course, restaurants, of course. Abroad, Japan, for example, retailers in Japan and the hotels and travel industry in Japan is just having a really rough time because they count on this huge influx of Chinese tourists, which aren't going to be coming this year. Schools and universities have closed. Now, part of this was fortuitous that it was so close to the holiday because they would have been closing anyway. So they've extended their holiday. But also many factories have done that. Many shops have done that. But particularly the factories, they would have taken a holiday anyway. A lot of factories just closed down during Chinese New Year because all the workers need to go home and see their families. So now some of them are extending the holiday and some aren't. Next week, theoretically, everyone's supposed to be back at work. So far, I have not heard a government decree saying that won't happen. I think that companies are being encouraged to not have their workers come back, and certain companies have closed. For example, IKEA, the furniture store, has closed all of its shops on the mainland, from what I understand, whereas McDonald's and Starbucks and some of the others, they've closed in certain locations, but I believe they're still open in others. So I think it's sort of a coin toss right now to see what happens if next week suddenly everybody returns home. Unless the government steps in and just halts all traffic, there's going to be another massive migration. And even if it's only half the size of the normal migration, it's still hundreds of millions of people that will be traveling again, transporting the virus, exposing themselves to the virus, particularly while riding on the trains and riding on the airplanes. They're very much in close proximity to each other, and they could be infecting each other. And then, of course, they'll be transporting germs and viruses from one side of the country to the other. Now, many major airlines, international airlines, have ceased all flights to China. Some have reduced their flights. Some are considering ceasing their flights. It seems like I'm trying to keep up with the news as much as I can, but it is changing hour to hour. So what I would say is it seems they're all considering it, and several of them have stopped their flights completely. Some have greatly reduced their flights. Some are only flying to major cities like Shanghai and Beijing, but they're not flying to places like Wuhan that are known to be epicenters of the disease. So international flights are decreasing. There's been international evacuations from Wuhan. I believe France removed all of their people. The United States removed their people. Different countries are arranging missions to evacuate their citizens from Wuhan. And I don't know if they will also have this in other cities as well. Meanwhile, in the midst of this, the CCP, the Communist Party of China, they already have such a bad reputation. Last year, they already had so many PR problems. This year, they're getting a bad reputation because people know that they lied about the disease, and people are upset about how they're handling the disease. One of the things they're doing is that normally the 2nd of February is the largest wedding registration day in China, and that's when a day that people like to get married. It's an auspicious day, and you go down and register the wedding. So what normally happens is there are these queues of just thousands and thousands of people at the city halls, and this is at essentially every city hall in China. And so the government has actually canceled that this year. They said that you can't go in and register your marriage on 2nd of February. So I think that's going to be really upsetting for people. Now, canceling the wedding registrations, canceling the Lunar New Year celebrations. This all makes complete sense, and these are the right steps for a government to take. Unfortunately, this adds to the people's anger, and the people are more and more upset with their government. And of course, the question always remains, well, if they had notified the WHO, if they had admitted that there was a problem earlier in December, could they have had a quarantine earlier in December, and maybe now they could have had a normal Lunar New Year? But we don't know. It's speculation. But the point is, it just adds to the anger. And it's just a very emotional thing, I think, for people. I think it's not nice to be locked in quarantine. It's not nice to be separated from your family. It's not nice to be able to go out, to go to restaurants and things like this, to not celebrate the New Year, which again is just very important for the Chinese people, and they don't get to celebrate New Year this year.